who is one of our story producers who works very closely with us, and he did basically everything you could possibly do on the Herb Abrams episode. But he also was working on this show. He was working on this episode with us, and he reached out to Eddie Mansfield first, and just and they spent like 2 hours on the phone talking, and the conversation kind of wavered back and forth between like Eddie's side of the story, like, really passionate side of the story, and also kind of like implications towards like that there would be violence towards us if we told this story, and it was like this like these kind of like threats, like, don't tell this story, like, don't mention my name, and if you do, like, or else, like, I know some people in Brooklyn, wink, wink, and stuff like that. And so it was really like, whoa. And then he basically, by the end of the conversation, was so heated about us just like, wanting to talk to him and tell the story, once and for all, that he basically declined and said, basically don't do this or else. And so then we were kind of at this like weird place, because we're like, man, are we going to have enough voices to really fill out this episode? And so then it was like, oh man, like, what are we going to do? And so we actually just like, went ahead filming it, and we were filming David, and we filmed Jim and everything. And then it wasn't until a mutual friend between me and Eddie got together and started to open up conversations again. He's a guy named Stu here in Toronto, and we just kind of reconnected, reset everything, had a fresh start, took the threats away, had a fresh start, and then tried to like, okay, let's tell the story. This is the story we want to tell. And then it was kind of like trying to build that trust up again. And I have to say, like, this episode was one of the more challenging episodes to build trust with our subjects, mainly David and Eddie, because, look, I mean, this story is about the distrust of media, in a lot of ways. Like, these guys feel like they have been burned by the way they were portrayed in a piece on television. So because of that, like, it made it really challenging at every step of the way. As much as I love David and then the situation with Eddie, it was every day was like, it was hot, like we were on, and then it was like cold, we're dead, like literally for months, even up until recently, so it's been one of the more challenging episodes just from like a personal management point of view in terms of being able to like tell this story. I have to say, I think out of almost more than any other one. But once we got to Houston to interview Eddie, like, it was all cool, and it was a pretty wild interview. But we were super happy just to have it finally in the can, because this was a real challenge to find the right people to talk about it. And that's why and you only see 4 voices in the show, so there is a reason for that.
I'm fascinated. Why would Dr. D be difficult if he's the one who reached out to you?
Sorry, what was that?
You sort of insinuated that this was a difficult episode to put together, and it felt like it was on and it was off and it was hot and it was cold, especially when you're comparing, the situations or circumstances you had to secure Eddie, but also Dr. D. But we started this conversation by saying Dr. D reached out to us. I know.
And that was, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. It started with that. And then it kind of was just, I don't know. I think maybe like the idea of it becoming real and becoming something that we're actually coming out, we're like coming out there, and here we are with cameras.
I know. Yeah. And I remember he was like, before we were coming out there, it was almost like he was trying to scare us off. Like, he was warning us, like, there's all these snakes out here. Like, if you're coming here, you better get a snake kit. And so
he was like, bring your snake kits.
So we went and got a snake kit. We were like, we got to get this. There's a chance we're going to get bit by snakes out here.
We were really worried. The night before, I remember we were having total like anxiety attacks. Like, man, like, there's going to be these fucking spiders and these fucking snakes out there. Yeah.
And I remember too, like, like, because we were nervous, like going there for the first time. And I remember like we got up like super early. We're like driving in the middle of nowhere, in Tennessee, and I remember like we like rolled up on his property, and like we're just driving down all these dirt roads trying to find his place. And there's like this gate, and I think he was standing by the gate. And we got there just like, I think the clock just turned a minute over like 9 a.m. or something when we were supposed to be there. And he just like ribbed us so hard for being like 1 minute late. I think like the first 10 minutes of the conversation, he was just like ribbing us so hard about that. But then quickly he warmed up to us, and we spent some time just kind of getting to know him. And then the first thing I think we shot was him taking us through the storage locker that he had on his property, which was just like a treasure trove of incredible archival video and photographs.
Incredible.
Incredible. Like I couldn't believe it. I was just like, how many other places could there be in the middle of nowhere America where there's just like a container sitting in a field somewhere filled with like priceless wrestling like artifacts and history? You know?
Probably several. But nothing was thrown away. Like, you know, he's one of the subjects that we've, you know, interviewed where, you know, not everything was kept, you know, which is obviously for us like amazing, you know, to go through that and just nerd out over photos and other memorabilia and stuff. But also going there, it kind of was like, you know, because we actually spent we spent 2 days with him. And I kind of, it was kind of like filming the Von Erich episode a little bit, like we did in season 1, where, you know, we're kind of on this, you know, wrestler's compound. You know, David kind of has built by hand his own compound, which is amazing. It's like he's built these like various structures on the property, his house, and like everything. It's really this whole thing that he's maintained and built himself, and it has this just like. It just had this really like sequestered, amazing quality to it. And it was like, I want to say it was like definitely like near, if not over 100 degrees. It was unbelievably hot. And there was like no fans, nothing. Like it was crazy. He actually expected us to do the interview outside, was what the plan was. And we had to like basically tell him like we would die if we did the interview outside.
I already run really hot. So like just even if I was filming outside in the winter, I'm going to be sweating. So there I'm drenched. I'm just like the whole day just soaked in water. Yeah. And he was awesome, and him and his wife were so nice. They like just kept bringing out towels and stuff for us.
It was wild. Yeah. It was wild. Yeah. And we should talk about his wife, Peggy, because she's just like amazing. And I tried really hard. I mean, talk about interview subjects for the show. I think my number one person that I wish could be in the show giving a point of view is actually David Schultz's wife, Peggy. And I tried so hard, but she was, I think, you know, camera shy, didn't want to do it and was nervous about it. But she, you know, her and David have been together, I think, since like he was like, I want to say like 17 or something.
It's been over 55 years. I know that. Yeah.
It's wild. And so she's been there for everything in his life. Like when he wrestled in Stampede, they like lived together in Calgary. You know,
like you hear those stories when he was training with Herb Welch, and like he like would come home and he was so sore, like Peggy would have to like lift him out of the truck and like bring him into the house because he was just so beaten down.
Yeah, she was there for every single aspect of his wrestling career and beyond. And she also, you know, with all the lawsuits that, you know, that they had to endure, you know, which was really tough on them. That's actually one thing that David really didn't talk about that much in the interview, but, you know, they were like facing down financial ruin with some of the lawsuits that they were engaged in with the WWE at certain points. And she was there like really managing that process. You know, I think she got even named in one of the lawsuits. And then she also, when David became a bounty hunter, like she became like a bail bonds person, right? Like, and
Pretty
she
much,
was,
like, yeah, like when you see like the old video, like the bounty hunting videos that they made, like she's the one there, like answering the phones and taking the calls and booking the, like, figuring out where the bounties are going and sending David off to go collect the bounties.
yeah, and like she was really involved in like I think tracking a lot of these people down, and like you would actually go into like into that like storage unit thing that he has there, and you would just see like these boxes of files of like all of the like like all the bounty hunter targets, with all the photographs and like what they've been charged and what they've, and it was amazing. And she was a huge part of that. And so like to spend time with her, and she was so nice.
Yeah.
And she was so cool.
She made us lunch like every day. Like, and
apple turnovers. She made us like, God, don't forget about the apple turnovers.
Yeah. But that's like, it was a side like we really wish we could have shown, because honestly, it was like one of the more inspiring things I think I've ever seen, like while making this show. It was seeing the relationship between David and his wife, and just like how they were like best friends, and like still to this day, and how they're just so close, and there was just something so romantic about it. Like, again, like that time when I saw him at StarCast and he was just like this really hard exterior, I knew there was something more to him. And then when you see him around Peggy, his heart just like opens up, and he's just like joking around with her and flirting with her. And and just to see them together after, over 50 years of marriage, still being best friends, and they're stuck to the hip, and the love was there. And that honestly was really inspiring to see.
Yeah, it was definitely like a whole aspect of the story that like we wish like really could have come through the episode. I think it would have added a whole nother layer to David as a character. But unfortunately, as hard as I tried and as many conversations I had with her and him about it, it just was kind of a no-fly zone, unfortunately. But I knew, as much as I knew it was like in their best interest, it's also like, someone who's not comfortable being on camera, and
yeah, totally.
You're not going to force somebody to do it, but it just would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you brought it up, and Dr. Day said, "Get out of here, woman! Get in there and scrub them floors."
Right.
Yeah, see, that's what you think. Like when you see those promos, it's just so intimidating. And yeah, that one scene he did for Vince where he's like screaming at his family and throwing them out the door, and then you just see like really like when you're with this guy, he can be really kind and romantic.
What a classic story where he had to explain, no, that wasn't my house, that wasn't my wife, those weren't my kids, that was not my gun. It was remarkable that Vince ever had to even explain that to the police. And I guess that's really one of the reasons a story like this would be picked for Dark Side of the Ring, is you guys have had a fun time sort of examining, where reality and quote unquote showmanship sort of get a little blurry. And there's maybe not a better example than this, but of course, really the genesis of what we're talking about is John Stossel getting slapped backstage. And the thing I've always wondered was, how in the world does he get backstage? And Stossel just in passing sort of says, well, Vince must have approved it. How in the world does this even happen? This doesn't feel like it should be. Like, why would Vince allow an investigative journalist backstage to Madison Square Garden?
That's a good point. I mean, as far as the story we got from the folks that we interviewed, the four people we interviewed, I mean, it basically, I guess he must have requested it, and he got access to it. I mean, he must have maybe Vince saw it as an opportunity, to get publicity, but to do it like, because I think he's interviewed in the piece, isn't he not? I think Vince is interviewed in that piece. I know I've seen a John Stossel Vince thing, so I'm sure he probably saw it as like a publicity opportunity, and especially if he could have featured some of his his heels, kind of sticking up for the business, if that's what this was going to morph into. Did he? Now the $1 million question is, did he anticipate for one of them to physically assault another. I don't know, but I think that I'm sure he was able to see that, the controversy creates cash type mentality, or